There is a kind of exhaustion that sleep does not fix. You can sleep 8 hours, take a day off, sit quietly, even relax, and yet something still feels heavy. Not physically heavy, psychologically heavy. A quiet pressure that sits behind your thoughts, behind your decisions, behind even simple moments. Pressure to keep up, pressure to not fall behind, pressure to be doing something meaningful, pressure to be improving, pressure to be responsible, pressure to make the right choices, pressure to not waste time, pressure to figure things out. Most people have lived with this pressure for so long that it feels normal. It feels like part of being an adult, part of being a good person, part of caring about your life. But what if much of this pressure is not actually required? What if much of what feels heavy is not coming from life itself, but from the way the mind carries life? There is the situation itself. And then there is the psychological weight placed on top of the situation. These two things are often confused, but they are not the same. You can have responsibility without psychological strain. You can care without carrying pressure. You can plan without feeling overwhelmed. You can work hard without feeling internally tight. You can want things without feeling incomplete. The weight most people feel is not coming from what they are doing. It is coming from what they are telling themselves about what they are doing. The constant inner sense that everything matters more than it actually needs to. That every choice is defining who you are. That every moment must count towards something. That time is always running out. That mistakes are dangerous. That rest must be earned. That uncertainty is a problem. That the future must be secured internally before it arrives externally. This creates an invisible pressure that follows people everywhere. At work, at home, while relaxing, while driving, while eating, even while doing things they enjoy. Because the pressure is not in the activity. It is in the relationship to the activity. A person can be sitting on the couch watching a show and still feel like they should be doing something else. Still feel slightly behind. Still feel slightly incomplete. Still feel like they should be improving something, fixing something, planning something, optimizing something. Even rest becomes heavy when it is filled with the idea that it must justify itself. This is psychological weight, and it is so common that it often goes unnoticed. People assume this is simply what life feels like. But there is another way life can feel. Not by avoiding responsibility, not by giving up ambition, not by becoming passive, but by seeing clearly where unnecessary pressure is being created internally. There is a difference between effort and strain. Effort is natural. Strain is psychological. Effort can feel clean, direct, engaged. Strain feels tight, urgent, pressured, like something is always at stake. Consider how many moments in a day are subtly loaded with the feeling that something must be resolved. Something must be figured out. Something must be secured. Something must be protected. Something must be improved. Something must be understood. Even when nothing immediate is required, the mind keeps running, trying to stay ahead of life, trying to manage outcomes, trying to maintain an internal sense of control. This constant mental activity creates weight, not because thinking itself is a problem, but because thought begins to carry things it was never meant to carry. Thought is very good at practical tasks, solving problems, planning steps, organizing information, communicating ideas, learning skills, navigating the world. But psychological weight begins when thought tries to secure identity, secure certainty, secure worth, secure control over the unknown. Life contains uncertainty. This is not a flaw. It is part of the design of reality. But the mind often treats uncertainty as something that must be eliminated internally before life can feel okay. So it begins to carry everything: past experiences, future possibilities, other people's opinions, imagined outcomes, regret, hope, fear, expectation, meaning, self-image, reputation, purpose, direction, all at once. The result is a background sense of pressure that never fully turns off, even when nothing is wrong, even when the moment itself is simple. A quiet sense that something still needs to be resolved. But what exactly needs to be resolved? Often nothing immediate. Yet the feeling persists, because the mind has learned to equate constant psychological effort with responsibility. It feels like letting go of pressure would mean becoming careless, unmotivated, unprepared. But that is not what happens when psychological weight begins to soften. What softens is the unnecessary layer, the added tension, the extra narrative, the constant self-evaluation. Action can still happen, planning can still happen, learning can still happen, growth can still happen, but without the sense that everything must be carried internally at all times. Think about how many things the mind tries to hold simultaneously: career direction, financial stability, family well-being, personal growth, health, time management, future decisions, past decisions, social expectations, personal expectations, unanswered questions, incomplete projects, things that might happen, things that might not happen, even things that have not happened yet can feel heavy simply because they exist as possibilities. The mind begins to live as if it must internally hold the entire structure of life together, as if constant mental involvement is required for things to work out, as if relaxing internally might cause things to fall apart externally. But look carefully. Life is already moving. Your heart is beating without mental effort. Breathing is happening. Cells are regenerating. Weather patterns are forming. Conversations are unfolding. Ideas are appearing. Opportunities are emerging. Learning is happening. Even many of your daily actions happen with very little conscious management. You drive while thinking about other things. You walk without calculating each movement. You speak without pre-planning every sentence. Life contains a great deal of natural intelligence, but psychological weight makes it feel like everything depends on constant internal pressure. Like if the pressure stops, everything stops. Yet moments likely exist in your own experience where pressure was not present and life still functioned. Perhaps a time when you were fully absorbed in something. A creative moment. A conversation that felt easy. A day where things seemed to flow. A simple activity where there was no internal resistance. In those moments, action still happened. Care still happened. Decisions still happened. But without the extra layer of heaviness. What was different? Often, the sense of psychological self-pressure was absent. The moment did not feel like a test, or a measurement, or a defining point in your identity. It was just happening. There is something deeply relieving about moments that do not feel like they must determine anything about who you are. Moments that are allowed to simply exist. Psychological weight often comes from the idea that every moment must contribute to a story about the self. Am I doing well enough? Am I behind? Am I improving? Am I successful? Am I secure? Am I respected? Am I making the right choices? Am I becoming who I should be? This constant referencing of experience back to identity creates tension. Because identity always feels like something that must be maintained, protected, improved, defended, explained, proven. And that is heavy. It is heavy to feel like you must constantly carry yourself, constantly think about yourself, constantly position yourself in relation to life. But what if life does not actually require that level of internal maintenance? What if much of the psychological weight people carry is optional? Not because responsibilities are optional, but because the internal pressure around those responsibilities is often learned rather than necessary. Many people were taught, directly or indirectly, that pressure equals motivation. That worry equals responsibility. That stress equals importance. That constant concern equals caring. But caring does not require constant internal strain. Responsibility does not require mental tension. Attention does not require anxiety. Clarity does not require pressure. In fact, excessive psychological weight often interferes with clear action. When the mind feels overloaded, simple decisions feel complicated. Small problems feel large. Uncertainty feels threatening. Time feels scarce. Everything feels more urgent than it actually is. And urgency creates the feeling that there is no room to breathe internally. No room to pause. No room to allow things to unfold. But life rarely demands constant urgency. There are moments that require quick response. But most of life unfolds in a much quieter rhythm. Psychological weight speeds up the internal sense of time. Everything feels like it must be figured out now, resolved now, understood now, decided now, secured now. But many things become clearer through time itself, through experience, through natural unfolding, not through internal force. The mind often tries to pre-solve life, trying to feel secure about things that cannot be secured in advance, trying to eliminate uncertainty before uncertainty arrives, trying to resolve questions that can only be answered by living. This creates tension that has no natural endpoint. Because the future continues to change, life continues to evolve, circumstances continue to shift, new information appears, old assumptions dissolve. If psychological stability depends on controlling the unknown, the mind will remain tense. But if psychological weight begins to loosen, space appears. Space to respond rather than pre-react. Space to learn as you go. Space to allow things to be incomplete. Space to not have everything figured out internally. This does not create chaos. It creates flexibility, resilience, clarity, because energy is no longer being used to mentally grip everything at once. Consider how many thoughts are simply attempts to hold life together internally, running through possibilities, imagining conversations, predicting outcomes, replaying situations, evaluating decisions, trying to feel prepared, trying to feel certain, trying to feel settled, trying to feel finished. But life is rarely finished. There is always something unknown, always something evolving, always something open. Psychological weight comes from trying to reach a permanent internal resolution about a reality that is constantly moving. And yet, even without permanent resolution, life continues. Meals get made, work gets completed, relationships continue, problems get solved, plans adapt, learning happens, growth happens. Even uncertainty can be lived with. You have lived through uncertainty before. Many times. There were moments in the past where you did not know how things would turn out. And yet here you are. Life moved. Solutions appeared. New directions emerged. Not always perfectly, but sufficiently. Often, more capacity exists than the mind gives itself credit for. But psychological weight makes everything feel fragile. As if everything depends on constant internal management. Yet many things do not require that level of mental involvement. Some things are handled when the moment arrives. Some things resolve themselves through time. Some things become irrelevant. Some things transform. Some things were never as urgent as they first appeared. Psychological weight makes everything feel equally important, equally urgent, equally defining. But in reality, life contains a range of importance. Some things matter greatly. Some things matter lightly. Some things pass quickly. Some things stay longer. Not everything needs to be carried with the same level of internal intensity. Imagine moving through a day without feeling like every moment must contribute to becoming someone. Without feeling like every decision defines your worth. Without feeling like every delay is a problem. Without feeling like every uncertainty is a threat. Without feeling like every experience must mean something. This does not make life meaningless. It makes life breathable. It makes room for intelligence that is not based on pressure. Room for creativity. Room for curiosity. Room for presence. Room for responsiveness. Room for genuine care. Psychological weight often reduces life to survival mode. Even when survival is not actually threatened. When everything feels important, the nervous system remains on alert. But when unnecessary weight begins to fall away, the system can regulate more naturally. Clarity improves. Patience increases. Decisions simplify. Perspective widens. Energy becomes available for actual living rather than constant internal preparation for living. Many people postpone living until they feel internally resolved, until they feel ready, certain, secure, confident, clear, finished. But those conditions rarely arrive completely. Life continues moving regardless. Psychological weight convinces people they must feel a certain way internally before fully participating in life. But participation itself often brings clarity. Action itself often brings learning. Experience itself often brings understanding. Not everything needs to be solved before living. Much becomes clear through living. What if the heaviness you feel is not coming from life itself, but from the assumption that everything must be carried mentally all the time? What if some of that weight can be put down? Not responsibility, not care, not participation, but the constant internal pressure to resolve everything psychologically. You do not have to solve your entire life in your head before living it. You do not have to secure your identity before taking action. You do not have to eliminate uncertainty before moving forward. You do not have to mentally carry every possible future outcome. Life can be lived step by step, moment by moment, decision by decision, without the need to internally hold the entire structure of existence together. There is a quiet strength in allowing life to move without constantly tightening around it. Strength not based on force, but on trust in the capacity to respond when needed. Trust in the ability to learn, adapt, adjust, grow. Trust that clarity often appears through participation, not before it. The mind may still offer thoughts, ideas, concerns, plans. That is natural. Thought is part of the human experience. But psychological weight begins to soften when every thought is not treated as something that must be carried indefinitely. Some thoughts can pass. Some questions can remain open. Some uncertainties can exist without immediate resolution. Some decisions can unfold over time. Some answers arrive later. The mind does not need to grip everything equally. As this becomes clearer, something begins to shift. Life still includes effort, still includes care, still includes responsibility. But the constant sense of inner pressure begins to loosen. Things can be taken seriously without feeling heavy. Things can matter without feeling overwhelming. Things can be meaningful without becoming burdensome. You may still work hard, still plan, still improve, still care deeply about people and outcomes, but without the constant background feeling that everything must be mentally carried at all times. This is not about becoming passive. It is about becoming unburdened. There is a difference. Psychological weight often disguises itself as strength, as discipline, as responsibility. But much of that weight is simply habit, learned pressure, conditioned tension, the assumption that everything must feel heavy in order to matter. But life does not require constant heaviness in order to function. In fact, many things function better without it. Clarity improves, creativity improves, relationships improve, decision-making improves, resilience improves, because energy is no longer being consumed by constant internal friction. This season explores what becomes possible when psychological weight begins to fall away. Not all at once, not through force, not through denial, but through seeing clearly how much pressure has been added unnecessarily. Seeing clearly that not everything needs to be carried internally all the time. Seeing clearly that life is already moving, already unfolding, already happening. You are not required to mentally hold everything together for life to continue. You are allowed to participate without carrying unnecessary weight. You are allowed to care without constant pressure. You are allowed to act without constant tension. You are allowed to live without constantly managing how your life feels internally. Perhaps more weight can be put down than you previously imagined, and what remains may feel lighter, clearer, more direct, more alive. Because life itself was never the heaviest part. The heaviest part was often the way the mind was holding it, and that can begin to change, not by becoming someone new, but by no longer carrying what was never truly required. This is where the season begins, not by removing responsibility, but by discovering how much of the burden was added quietly, gradually, almost invisibly, and how different life can feel when that extra weight is no longer constantly being carried. If something in this episode resonated with you, consider subscribing to the channel. This space is for exploring what life feels like when less psychological weight is being carried, not by becoming someone new, but by seeing more clearly what was never required in the first place. If you'd like to support the channel, liking the video helps more people find this kind of conversation. You can also share this with someone who may be feeling overwhelmed by the pressure of trying to hold everything together internally. And if you'd like to go deeper, there are additional episodes in this season that continue exploring what it means to live, work, care, and move through life with less unnecessary mental strain. Nothing you need to force, nothing you need to become, just an ongoing exploration of what becomes possible when the mind begins to carry less. I'll see you in the next episode.